Previously, we witnessed one of the most dramatic and awe-inspiring events in history. God delivered the Israelites in slavery from Egypt, after sending 10 powerful plagues that revealed his mighty hand. The story concluded with the Israelites celebrating the first Passover and leaving Egypt under Moses' leadership. Pharaoh's resistance crumbled, and the Israelites were finally free. Now, let's continue the journey as the people of God embark on their miraculous escape and begin their trek through the wilderness. After the Israelites were freed from Egypt, the Lord spoke to Moses with an important instruction. He said, "Set apart every firstborn as holy to me, whether it is human or animal. They belong to me." Moses gathered the people and reminded them of the day they left Egypt. He urged them to never forget how the Lord's mighty hand had rescued them. To honor this event, they were to avoid eating leavened bread during a special time each year. This tradition, observed in the month of Abib, would include eating unleavened bread for 7 days. On the 7th day, there would be a feast dedicated to the Lord. Moses explained, "No leaven should be found in your homes during this time. When your children ask why we do this, tell them, this is to remember how the Lord rescued us from Egypt with great power." This practice will serve as a sign, a reminder on your hands and between your eyes, to keep God's law close to your heart. Moses continued, "When the Lord brings you to the land he promised to your ancestors, a land flowing with milk and honey, you must set apart the firstborn of every animal for the Lord. If the firstborn is a donkey, redeem it by offering a lamb in its place. If not redeemed, its neck must be broken. Similarly, all firstborn sons must be redeemed. When your children ask why, explain that Pharaoh stubbornly refused to let us go, so the Lord struck down every firstborn in Egypt. This is why we dedicate all firstborn males to the Lord, and this tradition will be a lasting reminder of how God's mighty hand delivered us." When Pharaoh finally released the Israelites, God did not lead them through the shortest route, which passed through Philistine territory. He knew that if the people faced war, they might lose heart and return to Egypt. Instead, God guided them through the wilderness, toward the Red Sea. The Israelites marched in orderly groups, carrying the bones of Joseph with them. Joseph had made their ancestors swear to carry his remains to the promised land, saying, "God will surely visit you." As the Israelites journeyed, the Lord himself guided them. During the day, he led them with a pillar of cloud, showing them the way. At night, he provided a pillar of fire to light their path. The pillars were a constant reminder of God's presence and care, and they never left the people, whether day or night. This remarkable journey was not just a physical escape from Egypt but also a spiritual reminder of God's promises and power. The Israelites walked forward, guided and protected by their God, who had proven his faithfulness time and again. After their departure from Egypt, the Lord spoke to Moses, giving him specific instructions for the journey. He told Moses to have the Israelites camp near the sea at a place called Pi-Hahiroth, between Migdal and the sea, directly opposite Baal-zephon. God explained his plan. "Pharaoh will think the Israelites are trapped in the wilderness. I will harden his heart so that he pursues you. Through this, I will show my power, and the Egyptians will know that I am the Lord." Moses obeyed, and the Israelites set up camp by the sea. Meanwhile, Pharaoh and his officials realized the Israelites were gone, and they began to regret letting them go. "What have we done? We've lost our slaves," Pharaoh exclaimed. He immediately prepared his chariot and assembled an army, including 600 of his best chariots, along with all the other chariots of Egypt, each with officers in charge. Pharaoh, with a hardened heart, led his forces to pursue the Israelites. As the Egyptian army closed in, they found the Israelites camped by the sea. The sight of Pharaoh's army terrified the Israelites. They cried out to the Lord and turned to Moses, saying, "Why did you bring us out here to die? Were there not enough graves in Egypt? It would have been better to remain slaves than to die in the wilderness." Moses reassured them, saying, "Don't be afraid. Stand firm and watch how the Lord will save you today. The Egyptians you see now, you will never see again. The Lord will fight for you. Stay calm." Then the Lord spoke to Moses, "Why are you crying out to me? Tell the Israelites to move forward. Lift your staff, stretch out your hand over the sea, and divide the waters. The Israelites will walk through on dry ground. I will harden the hearts of the Egyptians so they will follow, and I will gain glory through Pharaoh, his chariots, and his army. Then the Egyptians will know that I am the Lord." The angel of God, who had been leading the Israelites, moved behind them, along with the pillar of cloud. The cloud created darkness for the Egyptians but provided light for the Israelites throughout the night, keeping the two groups apart. Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and the Lord sent a strong east wind that blew all night, dividing the waters and creating dry land. The sea stood like walls on both sides, and the Israelites walked through the sea on dry ground. The Egyptians pursued them, following with their chariots and horsemen into the midst of the sea. But during the early morning, the Lord looked down from the pillar of fire at the Egyptian army and threw them into confusion. He jammed the wheels of their chariots, making it difficult for them to move. The Egyptians realized what was happening and cried, "Let's flee from the Israelites. The Lord is fighting for them against Egypt." The Lord instructed Moses to stretch out his hand over the sea again. Moses obeyed, and the waters returned to their normal place, sweeping over Pharaoh's army. The chariots, horsemen, and all of Pharaoh's forces that had entered the sea were completely overwhelmed. Not one of them survived. The Israelites, however, had safely crossed the sea on dry ground. They saw the bodies of the Egyptians washed up on the shore, a stark reminder of the Lord's power and deliverance. That day, the Lord saved Israel from the hands of the Egyptians. The people saw the great power the Lord had displayed against Egypt. They stood in awe of him and put their faith in the Lord and in his servant Moses. This miraculous event marked a defining moment in the journey of the Israelites, showing God's unmatched power and his faithfulness to deliver his people. After the miraculous crossing of the Red Sea and the defeat of Pharaoh's army, Moses and the Israelites sang a song of praise to the Lord. Moses led them in singing, "I will sing to the Lord, for he has triumphed gloriously. He has thrown the horse and its rider into the sea. The Lord is my strength and my song, he has become my salvation. He is my God, and I will praise him, my father's God, and I will exalt him." The song celebrated the Lord's victory over Egypt, saying, "The Lord is a warrior, the Lord is his name." Pharaoh's chariots and army were cast into the sea, and his best officers drowned. The waters covered them, and they sank like stones in the depths. The people sang of the Lord's power and greatness. "Your right hand, O Lord, is majestic in power. You shattered the enemy with your mighty hand. At the blast of your nostrils, the waters piled up, and the sea stood like a wall. The enemy thought they could overtake us, but you blew your wind, and the sea swallowed them. Who is like you, Lord? Glorious in holiness, awesome in splendor, performing wonders." They also praised God's mercy and guidance, saying, "In your unfailing love, you led the people you redeemed. With your strength, you guided them to your holy dwelling. Nations will hear of this and tremble. Terror will grip the inhabitants of Canaan, Moab, and Edom." The song concluded with a proclamation of God's eternal reign. The Lord will reign forever and ever. Miriam, the prophetess and sister of Aaron, took a tambourine and led the women in song and dance. They joined in the celebration, singing, "Sing to the Lord, for he has triumphed gloriously. He has thrown the horse and its rider into the sea." After the celebration, Moses led the Israelites away from the Red Sea into the wilderness of Shur. They traveled for 3 days without finding water. Finally, they came to a place called Marah, but the water there was too bitter to drink. The people, thirsty and frustrated, began complaining to Moses, "What are we going to drink?" Moses cried out to the Lord, and the Lord showed him a piece of wood. When Moses threw the wood into the water became sweet and drinkable. There, God gave the Israelites a command and a promise. He said, "If you listen carefully to the voice of the Lord, do what is right in his sight, and obey his commands and laws, I will not bring on you any of the diseases I brought on the Egyptians. For I am the Lord who heals you." After leaving Marah, the Israelites came to a place called Elim. There, they found 12 springs of water and 70 palm trees. It was a refreshing and restful stop, and the people camped by the waters, grateful for God's provision. This part of the journey reminded the Israelites of God's faithfulness and care, even in the midst of challenges. Through miracles and promises, God continued to guide his people toward the land he had promised them. After leaving Elim, the Israelites entered the wilderness of Sin, situated between Elim and Mount Sinai. It had been 1 month since they had left Egypt. As they traveled further into the wilderness, food supplies began to dwindle, and the people grew restless and frustrated. They started complaining to Moses and Aaron, saying, "If only we had died in Egypt where we had plenty of food. You've brought us into this wilderness to starve us to death." Hearing their complaints, the Lord spoke to Moses. "I will rain bread from heaven for the people. Each day they will go out and gather just enough for that day. This will test whether they will follow my instructions. On the 6th day, they must gather twice as much so they can rest on the 7th day." Moses and Aaron addressed the people, reassuring them, "This evening you will know, it was the Lord who brought you out of Egypt. In the morning, you will see his glory because he has heard your complaints. Your grumbling is not against us, but against the Lord." Then Moses told Aaron to call the entire congregation to stand before the Lord. As Aaron spoke, the people looked toward the wilderness and saw the glory of the Lord appear in a cloud. The Lord said to Moses, "Tell the people that in the evening they will eat meat, and in the morning, they will have bread to the full. Through this, they will know that I am their God." That evening, quails came and covered the camp, providing meat for everyone. The next morning, as the dew lifted, the ground was covered with a fine flaky substance, small and round, like frost. The people were puzzled and asked each other, "What is it?" Moses told them, "This is the bread the Lord has given you to eat." Moses gave clear instructions. Each person should gather an omer of manna, the miraculous food given by God, for every member of their household. Take only what you need. The people went out and gathered the manna. Some collected more, and some less, but when they measured it, everyone had just enough. Those who gathered too much had nothing left over, and those who gathered too little lacked nothing. Moses warned them, "Do not keep any of it until morning." However, some people disobeyed and tried to save it. By morning, the leftover manna was full of worms and smelled terrible. Moses was angry with them for not following instructions. Each morning, the people gathered the manna, before the sun grew hot and melted it. On the 6th day, they collected twice as much as usual, 2 omers per person. The leaders of the community came to Moses to report this, and he explained, "This is what the Lord has said, tomorrow is a day of rest, the holy Sabbath. Bake and boil what you need today, and save the rest for tomorrow." The people followed these instructions, and the leftover manna did not spoil or grow worms. Moses reminded them, "Eat it today, for it is the Sabbath, and there will be no manna in the fields." 6 days you will gather it, but on the seventh day, there will be none. Despite this, some people went out on the seventh day to gather manna, but they found nothing. The Lord said to Moses, "How long will you refuse to keep my commands? I have given you the Sabbath, so I am providing enough bread on the sixth day for 2 days. Everyone must stay where they are on the seventh day and rest." So, the people rested on the Sabbath. The Israelites called the bread manna. It looked like small coriander seeds, was white, and tasted like wafers made with honey. Moses told the people, "The Lord commands that an omer of manna be kept for future generations, so they can see the bread he provided in the wilderness." Aaron placed the manna in a jar and set it before the Lord as a testimony. The Israelites ate manna every day for 40 years, until they reached the borders of Canaan, the land God had promised them. Through manna, God not only provided for their physical needs, but also reminded them of his faithfulness, and the importance of trusting his commands. The Israelites continued their journey from the wilderness of Sin, following the Lord's command, and camped at a place called Rephidim. However, there was no water to drink, and the people were growing desperate. They argued with Moses, demanding, "Give us water to drink." Moses responded, "Why are you arguing with me? Why are you testing the Lord?" But the people were still thirsty, and their frustration turned into anger. They complained bitterly, saying, "Why did you bring us out of Egypt? Do you want us, our children, and our livestock to die of thirst?" Moses, overwhelmed by their complaints, cried out to the Lord, "What am I supposed to do with these people? They are ready to stone me." The Lord answered Moses, "Go ahead of the people. Take some of the elders of Israel with you, and bring the staff you used to strike the Nile. I will stand before you by the rock at Horeb. Strike the rock, and water will come out of it for the people to drink." Moses obeyed. In the presence of the elders, he struck the rock with his staff, and water gushed out, enough for everyone to drink. Though the people had argued and doubted, Moses named the place Massah, and Meribah, meaning testing and quarreling. While the Israelites were at Rephidim, the Amalekites came and attacked them. Moses called Joshua, one of his trusted leaders, and instructed him, "Choose some men and go out to fight Amalek. Tomorrow, I will stand on the top of the hill with the staff of God in my hand." Joshua did as Moses commanded, leading the Israelites into battle. Meanwhile, Moses, along with Aaron and Hur, climbed to the top of a hill overlooking the battlefield. As the battle raged, whenever Moses raised his hands, the Israelites gained the upper hand. But when his hands grew tired and he lowered them, the Amalekites started to prevail. Seeing Moses struggle, Aaron and Hur found a large stone for him to sit on. Then, they stood on either side of him, holding up his hands so that they remained steady until sunset. With Moses' hands lifted high, the Israelites, led by Joshua, defeated the Amalekites. After the battle, the Lord instructed Moses, "Write this event down as a reminder, and make sure Joshua hears it, because I will completely erase the memory of Amalek from under heaven." In gratitude and worship, Moses built an altar and named it Jehovah Nissi, which means, "The Lord is my banner." He declared, "The Lord has sworn, the Lord will be at war with Amalek for generations to come." This victory not only demonstrated God's power but also showed the importance of teamwork, faith, and reliance on God during times of struggle. When Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, heard about all that God had done for Moses and the Israelites, he decided to visit Moses. Jethro brought along Moses' wife, Zipporah, and their 2 sons. One son was named Gershom, which means, "I have been a foreigner in a strange land," and the other was named Eleazar, meaning, "The God of my father was my help and saved me from Pharaoh's sword." Jethro arrived at the camp in the wilderness near Mount Sinai, the mountain of God, where Moses and the Israelites were staying. he sent a message to Moses. Moses went out to greet Jethro. He bowed before him, kissed him, and asked about his well-being. Together, they went into Moses' tent. Moses shared with Jethro everything that the Lord had done to Pharaoh and the Egyptians for the sake of Israel. He told him about all the challenges they had faced along the way and how the Lord had delivered them from every trouble. Jethro was overjoyed to hear about God's goodness to Israel and how he had rescued them from the Egyptians. Jethro praised God, saying, "Blessed be the Lord who has delivered you from the hand of Pharaoh and the Egyptians. Now I know that the Lord is greater than all other gods, because he has shown his power over those who acted arrogantly against his people." Jethro then offered a burnt offering and sacrifices to God. Aaron and the elders of Israel joined him and Moses to share a meal in God's presence. The next day, Moses took his usual place to judge the people. From morning until evening, people came to Moses with their disputes, seeking guidance on God's laws. When Jethro saw how Moses handled everything alone, he asked, "Why are you doing this? Why are you sitting alone while all these people stand around you from morning until evening?" Moses explained, "The people come to me to ask for God's guidance. When they have a dispute, I judge between them and help them understand God's laws and instructions." Jethro replied, "What you are doing is not good. You will wear yourself out, and the people will be exhausted too. This task is too heavy for you to handle alone. Listen to my advice, and may God guide you. You should represent the people before God and bring their issues to him. Teach them his laws and instructions, so they know how to live and what to do. However, you need to select capable, trustworthy men who fear God and hate dishonest gain. Appoint them as leaders over groups of thousands, hundreds, fifties, and tens. Let them handle the smaller matters, while you deal with the more difficult cases. This will make your work easier, and they will share the burden with you. If you do this, and God approves, you will be able to endure, and the people will go home satisfied." Moses listened to his father-in-law's advice and implemented it. He selected capable men from all of Israel, and made them leaders over the people. These leaders judged smaller disputes, while the more complex cases were brought to Moses. This system brought relief to Moses and peace to the people. Afterward, Moses said farewell to Jethro, who returned to his own land, leaving Moses better prepared to lead the Israelites. The story of Exodus 13-18 teaches us profound lessons about trust, gratitude, and leadership. It reminds us that God is always with his people, guiding and providing for them, even in the most challenging circumstances. The Israelites learned to rely on God's faithfulness, as he led them with a pillar of cloud by day, and a pillar of fire by night, parted the Red Sea, provided manna and water in the wilderness, and protected them from their enemies. This narrative also emphasizes the importance of obedience and faith, as God's instructions and laws were given for the people's benefit and protection. Additionally, Jethro's wise counsel to Moses shows the value of seeking guidance, sharing responsibilities, and fostering teamwork for effective leadership. Ultimately, this passage highlights God's unwavering care for his people, and calls us to trust his plan, be thankful for his provision, and work together to fulfill his purposes. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more about God's incredible works, please like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel for more inspiring stories from the Bible. Together, let's continue to explore the wonders of God's Word.